Good afternoon or evening, everybody. I am so glad that you've joined us tonight. You are here for an Archaeological Conservancy webinar, and this one is a little bit different than normal. Normally, we bring in outside experts, and this time you get to hear from some of us from in-house, and we are really excited to release to you our newest virtual tour of a property that we have in central New Mexico. So welcome. My name is Susan Bowdoin, and I am the Digital Outreach Coordinator for the Conservancy. And I'm joined tonight by April Brown, Mandy Woods, and Sarah Weber, and they're going to be introducing themselves to you as we go this evening. Just a few reminders before we dive in. Remember that there's a Q&A section down at the bottom of the screen. That's the best place for you to post your questions. And yes, we do want your questions tonight. That's what tonight is all about. We're going to share our sites with you, and we want to know what you want to know about it. So please do use that area. We might be answering via text, or if it's something that the whole group might benefit from, we may hang on to it until the end of our talking part so that we can address you as the whole group. If you have any technical difficulties, we are live streaming on Facebook, and we will also be recording the session and then posting it to our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow. So those are some options for you. So with that, we're going to start our presentation off with Sarah, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about the goals behind this project and where this idea of filming the Fetterman Reserve came from. Sarah, it is all yours.
Thanks, Susan. For those of you that don't know, my name is Sarah Weber, and I am the grant writer and special projects director at the Conservancy. I want to briefly go over the grant that made this film possible. The New Mexico Humanities Council grant program provided an exciting opportunity to expand our online education program. Their grants focus on projects that incorporate public interaction in humanities programming, and in December of 2022, we were awarded funding for our virtual public outreach program. This project includes the production of 2 site visit videos along with a 5-part lecture series. A list of our lectures can be viewed here and seen on our YouTube channel. Our site videos focus on the history of our preserves and the factors it takes to maintain them and protect them from vandalism and looting. The videos also spread the word about the Conservancy's mission and the importance of cultural resource preservation. We are grateful for the Humanities Council support and hope to work with them again in the future. And I'm gonna give it back to you, Susan. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you for the reminder. I didn't want to be talking over the top of you. So as Sarah mentioned, we have 5 different virtual lectures that are part of this grant that we've received. 4 of them have happened already, but if you're interested in the topics, they are archived on YouTube. Our 5th will be on February 15th, where we will be hearing from Davina Tubers, who is postdoc at, oh my gosh, I believe it's University of Arizona or Arizona State, one of the two. She's going to be talking about an isolation center in southern Arizona that was also used as a Japanese internment camp and her archaeological research there. Today, we want to take you to a very remote location in central New Mexico. We're going to the Rio Salado Valley, to the location of a preserve that we have and also a ghost town. I'm going to turn things over to April. She's going to talk to you first about the site that we have, and then we'll go on from there. So April, it is all yours.
All right. Okay, let's see. Well, first of all, my name is April Brown, and I'm the Southwest Regional Director for the Archaeological Conservancy. And I'm going to share my screen here and tell you a little bit more about the research at Fetterman and how we know what's there. So first of all, let's get the presentation going. Here we go. So if you watch the video, this is going to be a very familiar view for you. This is an aerial view of the property looking southeast. And let me get my laser pointer here. And this area back here you're seeing in this drainage here is the Rio Salado, which was the lifeblood of both the pre-contact and the historical sites that were located up and down the Rio Salado here. And this was used as a permanent water source until the 1950s when it dried up for various reasons, And now the Rio Salado only runs seasonally, usually during the monsoon seasons, which you probably saw that clip in the video of the raging flood in this now dry riverbed. And so from this view, and there's not a lot of visible surface architecture that you can see here that's related to the indigenous occupation. So you might wonder how we know what's there. In 2005, a large-scale survey was conducted in this area ahead of the construction of a residential development here. And the survey identified multiple pit house villages up and down the Rio Salado that date to the Pueblo 1 and 2 times, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Many of the villages shared both Pueblo and Mogollon characteristics, and some even showed Chacoan influences. So Jerry Fetterman purchased and preserved this site because he understood the significance of the archaeology here. And not only was he a driving force for the preservation of this site, he was also a part of the original archaeological survey conducted here in 2005. So he's how we know what's here now. And so before the survey was conducted, and here just to give you a little orientation, you can kind of see this little circle here, and just below that's our property, and down here to the west is Riley, New Mexico, the ghost town. And so before the archaeological survey was conducted, there were plans to construct approximately 25 homes in this area that were supposed to be part of the Santa Rita Ranches subdivision. And you can see the original subdivision map as it was planned here. And you can see down here in lot 63 is where the Fetterman Preserve exists. And so in 2005, Jerry spearheaded the archaeological survey for this project through his company, his company called Woods Canyon Archaeological Consultants. Jerry and his crews surveyed the property for this development, as well as other properties up and down the Rio Salado. And what they found were scattered village sites on low promontories overlooking the Rio Salado. And then, like I said, the majority of them were pit house villages dating to about the Pueblo 1 times that shared both Pueblo and Mogollon characteristics. And some of the villages also showed evidence of later occupation into the Pueblo 2 era. And we're going to talk a little bit how that applies to the Fetterman Preserve itself. And so here's one of the original archaeological survey maps. The Fetterman site was surveyed and recorded as LA 150553. And if some of you may remember, we've talked about this in previous lectures. These are state designations for recorded archaeological sites in New Mexico. And the LA stands for Laboratory of Anthropology. And then on this 20-acre parcel, Jerry discovered Pueblo 1 and 2 archaeology, as well as historical components related to the historical town of Riley to the west. So as you can see, he identified several buried structures and middens associated with ancestral Pueblo occupation, as well as surface architecture like stone foundations, a corral, and fences dating to about the 20th century, the early 20th century. There's also a segment of the historic Riley-Tubelin Road, as you can see right through here. And it terminates at a later 20th century dam down here. And so let's just take a look at how this site map applies to the actual parcel. In Jerry's survey report, he describes the site as a large multi-loci, multi-component habitation occupied during the Pueblo 1 and 2 periods, as well as during historic times. And according to Jerry's survey, the largest and most intense occupation occurred during the Pueblo 1 period, which dates between 750 and 950 CE. And so this occupation was represented by a rock scatter labeled structure 3, which you can see up here, 5 adobe mounds labeled structures 2, 4, 5, 8, and 9. And this structure down here is actually 9. There's 2 7s. This is supposed to be structure 9 here on the map. And these adobe mounds actually contain buried adobe fragments with beam deposits in them. 3 possible pit house depressions down here next to structure 9, right down here. And 2 middens that covered around 5 acres, and they go right around these sites here and these areas around here. And the middens contain thousands of lithic and ceramic artifacts, including gray wares, brown wares, red wares, and a few decorated sherds. The variety of sherds here demonstrate pottery styles that are representative of ancestral Pueblo, which are the gray wares, and Mogollon, which are more representative of the brown wares. And lithics included a stemmed archaic style dart point, that Jerry believed was collected by one of the occupants of this site, probably from another midden. And he also states in his report that there are likely more pit houses on this property and probably more room blocks here too, but they just weren't visible or they just couldn't find them during the survey. And so we talk a lot about pit house structures. And so I just wanted to give you a quick look at what one actually might have looked like back in the day. And so during the Pueblo one, again, at 750 to about 950 CE, you had subterranean earthen structures with earthen floors and 4 timber beams that supported a wood roof. And the hearth was kind of central to the home here. And some of the deflectors and walls were made of standing slabs. And Jerry noted in his report that there were standing slabs in some of these room blocks. So that definitely translates. And so you can imagine that these structures were dotted all over the Fetterman property at some time. And so let's take a look at the Pueblo II occupation, which again dates between 950 and 1150 CE. And this is represented a much smaller area. It's structure 6 and its associated pit depression. And it's thought that the pit depression is probably a kiva. Structure 6 was a room block measuring about 15 by 3 meters, forms a south-facing arc that encloses what they think is the kiva. And Jerry also notices notes a scatter of Socorro white on black pottery here. And that is the pottery style that is thought to demonstrate Chacoan influences. So let's take a quick look at what a room block might have looked like. And this is what a Pueblo II, this is a good example of what a Pueblo II room block would look like. And after 1000 CE, ancestral Pueblo and Mogollon influences in these villages are less distinct. Above ground structures replace the pit houses of yesterday, and populations grow and expand into the lower elevations. And so you'll note how this room block is an L-shaped room block, opening and closing kind of a kiva, and that's very representative of structure 6 at the Fetterman property. And so finally, the third component here is the historical component that is contemporary with the town of Riley. And this includes 2 historical road segments, a corral here, the fire ring down here overlooking the Rio Salado, and a low cobble mound labeled structure 7 down here. And these all are associated with this 4-room structure up here in the north here. The 4-room structure measures about 30 feet squared, and the middens around the home up here and around structure 6 definitely confirm the dates of the occupation here. They contain porcelain fragments, tin cans, metal, and glass bottles. So there's multiple layers to this site. And this is a perfect time for me to pass it over to Susan so she can tell you more about the historical research here.
Thanks, April. I'm going to switch over and share my screen back. But while I'm doing that, take a look at April's screen with that map. We're going to be traveling down that road to the left, where we find Riley. And this is a nice overhead drone shot of what is left of Riley. In its heyday, it was supposed to be around 100, maybe 120 people were actually living in this small valley. Riley was established in 1881. There was I think it was 14 families that moved from the Rio Grande area near Lematar. They had been flooded out and needing a new place to live. They were Mexican Americans. Of course, 1881 is well before statehood. They settled in this tiny little valley, and it became their home. We learned what we know about the Fetterman property and about the Riley area first from Jim Walker, who was our previous Southwest Regional Director. He met with us and shared with us what he knew after having worked with Jerry Fetterman to transfer the property to the Conservancy, and gave us lots of information on the preserve and a little bit of information on Riley. And so I decided to dive in and do some research for us so that we would be ready to go and actually do the filming down there. And it made a lot of sense to us to include that historical piece in there too, because this is an area that isn't well known, and we wanted to contribute to that piece of New Mexico history. this is where I started that journey. And so if you are local in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, and you haven't been to this place, you need to go. This is the Special Collections Library branch of the Albuquerque Bernalillo Library System. It is downtown off Edith and Lomas, and it was built in 1925 and was the main library in Albuquerque for 50 years. So if you've been a long time Albuquerque resident, you probably know about this and have seen this building. I found this quote on their website, which I thought spoke very well to what I found when I walked in the doors here. This is a reference-only library. You do not check anything out, but the reference librarians at the desk that you see to the left were perfectly lovely. Their collections include everything about Albuquerque and New Mexico. So everything from popular treatments of ghosts and aliens, all the way into scholarly publications, newspapers, maps, books, pamphlets, you name it, they have it on history, anthropology, archaeology, religion, language, arts, everything that is Southwest in New Mexico. And so it is a wonderful place to visit. When I went in and talked to those reference librarians, the first things that they brought me were books and pamphlets and newspaper articles and magazine articles and all kinds of things. And I spent the entire afternoon combing through there and found pretty much the same information time after time after time. It was paragraphs talking about how Riley was established as this tiny little farming community. And then in the early 1900s, when that whole area of New Mexico was really booming with mining, there was some mining activity. Not a lot. It didn't produce a whole lot. In fact, we found that there's discrepancy in what people are reporting about what happened with that mining, but it was mentioned in there. So this gave me a few places, a few leads, and so I dug a little deeper. I went to the National Archives and discovered that the paperwork for Riley's first post office, which was established in the late 1800s, was actually digitized in the National Archives. You saw that in the video. I also went to New Mexico Tech's website and their librarians and dug for information on the mining activity in the area. We found that near Riley, it was really more manganese and coal, as opposed to the Kelly mine, which is right outside of Magdalena, 20 miles south, which was dealing with gold and silver and other kinds of mining materials. The Magdalena newspaper, also, there are digital copies of that from the early 1800s at the Magdalena, or excuse me, the Socorro Library. So I dug into those also. All of these were amazing, and we found wonderful information about the historic town of Riley. But I think our best information, and I think that my team would probably agree, came from our primary source people that we actually got to talk to. On the left, you see Lawrence and Rod Aragon. Lawrence Aragon is a descendant of Pedro Aragon. He's one of the first 14 to establish Riley. So his family has been in the Riley, or Santa Rita, as it was originally named, area since it began. And he was perfectly delightful. We spent an afternoon talking with him, and he gave us the tour of inside of the church, which was built in the late 1800s and is still cared for by his family. Perfectly generous and wonderful people, and it was lovely to get their perspective of where Riley has been and where Riley is now. We also had wonderful interactions both via email and in person with Paul Harden, who is with the Socorro County Historical Society. And the benefit of having Paul on board with us is that Paul has talked to many of the descendants of the original folks that established Riley. And so he was able to give us some information and some leads on things. So I want to say a big thank you to both these families, and also to the Santa Rita Ranches Landowners Association, who also helped us just get a better feeling of what that whole area is about, what it's like when it rains. April mentioned to you the Rio Salado flooding. We got to see a little bit of that moisture in the river, and that sand gets really slick really fast. So thank you to all of them for helping us out. Mandy is going to talk to you a little bit about the community involvement piece of what we do. I flipped a little bit too fast, Mandy, sorry about that. And so I'm going to hand it over to her now. Mandy, it's all yours.
Hi guys, I'm Mandy. I am basically April's assistant, but I'm also the Southwest Regional Representative, and it's not just the historical research and the acquisition and the survey that goes into it. there's a lot of other steps and processes. And the first is actual consultation. And consultation happens with many parties. It can be with BLM and forestry. It can happen with park services. It can also happen with officers within the county and people who work in local aspects of the community. Sometimes we have residential sites that were built around a site. So we'll have a whole community development where there's an entire neighborhood and they will be surrounding an archaeological site. And we'll have to maintain the weeds or the trees on that in order to keep it within the community rules. And so sometimes we'll work with the noxious weed departments and tree trimming communities in there so that way we can keep the site clean and up to date, but also very well protected. Consultation heavily also involves Indigenous communities and anybody who lays ancestral claim to the site. So we try to, as much as we can, stay in contact with them, work with them. We'll bring them to the site. We'll ask for their perspective and their opinion often to try and move forward with a management plan. Sometimes our plans work very well, and other times they take a little bit of time. Management plans that the Conservancy sets are for about 100 years once we acquire the property initially, and then in perpetuity from there on. Other organizations we work with are like local historical societies. We're considering a property in northern New Mexico where we'll be potentially partnering with the Taos Historical Society. Stuff like that really helps to keep a lot of the knowledge kind of local to the community and involving community members so that way they can be a part of the preservation process. We can do this with other organizations, and we do that very closely, as you guys might have noticed up at Mesa Prieta with the Mesa Prieta Petroglyph Project, and up again in Crow Canyon area in Colorado. We also work heavily with the state archaeologists and the tribal archaeologists for the state. Those are people we rely on. We will go to them for advice. We will get site stewards from them. Oftentimes we will be able to get updated archaeological information. So having communication and dialogue with your state archaeologists is pretty vital. Susan, if you could go to the next page, please. Going to these sites like we did with Fetterman and some of the other sites that we do pretty regularly gives us the opportunity to check what problems some of these sites are having. Are they having fencing problems? Are they having stabilization issues? Are we having a backfilling problem? Do we have open holes? Are they from mining? Are they from looting? What can we do? Restoration, if any, needs to be had. And how can we use this site to further educate people in the future? A lot of the sites that we have are registered on either the state or national registry. So that way they can continue to be used for later in the research aspects. And I think some of them we would like to try and do or have been previously used for field schools. Visiting the sites does also allow us to establish proper boundaries for the site and updating the archaeological record for that purpose. So sometimes we see erosion on a site and it will look different. As April mentioned, aspects of the site that Jerry thought were visible at once were no longer when he finally did his survey. So he thought there might be more than what was actually visible. And that actually happens a lot. So it's important to keep the archaeological record updated. We also try to obtain funding by working with local community members and doing fundraising opportunities. We are membership based, and then we also apply for grants when it comes in time for some of these larger projects, such as stabilization, backfilling, and restoration. The next step that we would try to go for is obtaining stewardship. This is where the community involvement comes in because we rely on people who are passionate about preserving archaeology and being a part of this community. So a lot of our site stewards are actually volunteers, and many of them go through a formal state training through whatever state that they're in, so that way they can be trained formally in the preservation methods for that state. And then that allows us to continue having an updated record of whatever erosion we might be seeing, if stuff needs to be taken care of vegetation wise, should we do any reseeding with native plants? Are we having any issues with neighbors and cows and roaming pasteurization? Stuff like that will help us with this and having a site steward and maintaining the archaeological record. One more, Susan. So the screen that's behind all of these images is actually a really cool donation and an example of the partnership that we have that was given to us by a forestry tech archaeologist who works for the Forestry Service in Oklahoma. And that is a site we have out there called Grove and Davis, and it's a mound site. And so we can use those sites and give them to people so we can get updated technology and images such as the LiDAR image. First steps in the Conservancy are to identify anything we might see that's wrong or needs to be worked on. Fencing issues are primarily a first because we want to keep the site secured. Once we acquire the site, fencing is the absolute first thing we do. We'll try and find a fencer. And if there's any small repairs, we'll try and do them ourselves. So that way we can just keep it up. But securing the site also means that it's going to be wildlife friendly because they're not just archaeological sites, they're wildlife preserves. So we will have a wildlife friendly fence that will allow for the safe passage through. And then management comes along with the site stewardship. Many sites that we have will have multiple site stewards, and that's to ensure that they are as protected as possible. That can include the neighbors, the former landowners, and then again, those state-given site stewards. Some of these are examples that we have here where we were working with some of our site stewards in Arizona, actually repairing a fence locally while on a visit. This is a picture we've most recently taken of Susan, our digital coordinator, and her husband, where we were doing our most recent film. And this is how we use our sites to educate people. We try as hard as we can to use our sites to formally educate people on preservation. While we were out yesterday, I heard a really good quote from Dr. Matthew Martinez, who you guys have heard from before if you're regulars. And he said, education is preservation. And I think that the Conservancy really strives to do that. Next one. After acquisition, I mentioned earlier that grants and fundraising are a big thing. And we really do strive to speak to the community in that time. We'll reach out to all of our members, and we will reach out to local other organizations that might have an interest in preservation and similar ideas as to how we can handle some of our sites as well. Once we get the assignment of some of these site stewards, a lot of the tours that are given by the site stewards. And since the sites are considered private property, you will need to get in touch with one of us so we can, basically set up the tour. But they're free, they're open, and they're available. And basically wherever you are, whatever state you're in that we have a site nearby, if it's available and there's a site steward, more than likely you can go and see the site. And then as we do keep the sites in perpetuity for research and preservation, if you're affiliated with an institution like a university and you're doing research, we have a formal application process that you can do, which you would go to our board. This application is like a little packet, has all the questions that you need to fill out, and then you submit it with your research. You give, a little summary of what you've got going on, what you're looking for, and then it goes to the board. The board is who helps us make bigger decisions on a grander scheme. And they will decide if the research is invasive, then might not happen. But if it is non-invasive, which we try to do, such as GPR, ground penetrating radar, LiDAR, sometimes photogrammetry and other non-invasive techniques, survey is also non-invasive. We would absolutely try to work with you guys on the research aspect there. The reason that these sites are so well loved and protected is because they're in danger of being lost every single day. I think a lot of things that can happen to a site are not commonly well thought of. So I've actually listed here some for you. Modern and suburban and agricultural development it poses a really big risk to a lot of sites, especially some of the more suburban action. What we can try to remember when we have an archaeological site in the neighborhood is every time that there's construction going around, those vibrations are felt all throughout the ground, and that can actually cause damage to a site as well. Looting is an active problem faced at many archaeological sites across the country and across the world. And the only thing that we can continue to do to prevent looting is the continuance of education on why cultural heritage and preserving archaeology is so important. Increased erosion and climate change are definitely another contribution to why we are losing sites. We see a lot of undercutting at, really soil and friable sites, soil heavy sites, human activities and ecotourism, just heavy tourism. There's a site here in New Mexico called Tent Rocks that has actually been closed for the time being due to over tourism. And so that can actually cause more destruction than it can helping, even with the education aspect. Mining actually also poses a very big risk and danger to a lot of archaeological sites, as they take place in a lot of areas where sites also happen to be because those resources were there and they were being used. And so modern mines most of the time end up happening on top of older, more ancient mines. Deliberate cultural destruction kind of goes hand in hand with looting, but it also can play a separate hand in people who just are out to purposefully destroy cultural heritage sites. And so we try really hard to prevent that from happening, and again, just educating the people on why some of these sites are so important, because once they're gone, they're gone. Unauthorized and inaccurate archaeological work can sometimes be pay-to digs. It can be people who are incorrectly permitted digging on a site, and it can be people who mean the best but do the worst, like people who see somebody who has done graffiti on a petroglyph and they try to clean it up, but without being trained properly, we can actually do more damage to the petroglyph than we can in saving it. So really going to the professionals and knowing who those professionals are in your state are a really good resource. If you come across something, you can always go to your state or local archaeologists, and they will more than likely be willing to try and help you. And I think that is actually all I have for my portion.
Actually, Mandy, don't go anywhere yet. You've got a couple different things. First of all, I noticed that Cliff has raised his hand. Cliff, I'm going to go ahead and press on allow you to talk so you can ask Mandy your question directly, if that's okay. For everybody else, if you would type up in the Q&A, that would be great, so that we can make sure we make good use of the time. So Marilyn, I saw you pop up.
Hi, Cliff. What's your question?
Cliff is muted.
I'm trying to unmute it and it's not letting me. Cliff.
I think he has to unmute it himself.
Yeah.
Oh.
Are you there, Cliff?
I don't have a question.
Oh,
okay. I saw your hand raised and it looked like you had a question. Thanks for checking in with us.
Maybe it's a hello wave. Hello.
Yeah, well, I didn't even hello, but anyway, nevertheless.
That's okay. Thank you. So everybody, I'm going to ask you to use the Q&A. That way we don't have that problem of people not being able to connect in. So Marilyn, go ahead and type your question in that Q&A section. Mandy, I wanted to also follow up with you. There's a couple things on Facebook that were for you. One of them was a shout out to you about some of the content that you covered and interest in having a recording of the session, because you covered some things that are important to include in presentations. So that was just a thank you. I think from what I'm seeing, people would like to know a little bit more about site stewardship, and maybe you and April can tag team that. There's a question about our tribes asked to site steward also, and there's also one about Aboriginal and I think people having access to the sites that we own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead,
We
April.
encourage it. We definitely encourage it. We want to be able to not only allow them to be site stewards, but also allow tribes access to do whatever they want. Ceremonies, within the preservation boundaries, of course. But what I mean is, like, they have access to visit the site and do ceremonies or whatever they would like, and take their people to learn, like Mandy said, education.
Yeah. Many of the sites actually still do have annual visits by a lot of local Bowdoin and indigenous communities here. What were some of the other questions to me?
So one just popped up in our Q&A section. Bruce, thank you for using that Q&A. He's wanting to know about site stewards possibly in Arizona. If somebody was interested in being a site steward, what would they need to do first?
Well, you can actually reach out to me directly, and I will say my email very slowly at the very end of this for people who are interested in contacting me directly. And I can get you set up with our regional site representatives for the Arizona Site Steward program that we go through directly. They can get you training, or we can get you on a site wherever you are.
Mandy, I'll go ahead and pop your email in the chat box as you guys are answering some questions. So it'll be there. And
That would be great.
April, can I do the same for you also?
Sure, of course. Yes, please.
Perfect. All right, so another question that's here is from Heather. Is there a long-term plan for the site yet? I think she's probably talking about Fetterman, since that's what we're talking about tonight. A visitor center, a research only, native use only, open to the public, that kind of thing.
Fetterman
So the
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Mandy. I think we both know well, Fetterman is currently, first of all, it's very, very, very remote, difficult to get to actually. Takes about an hour from any point of civilization just to get back in there. So there's no plans for visitor centers because that's, it's just not that kind of site. We could do limited tours there upon request. Furthermore, we're planning, we're in the process of fencing the entire perimeter right now, and finishing up that project so that we can make sure that it's protected and people can't just walk into it. But no, for right now, we would do limited tours and take people out there as we get requests. Mandy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think if you want to post my email on Facebook as well for those people on Facebook who had questions regarding stewardship, I'd be happy to talk to them. For those who are curious about the region that we handle, the Southwest is pretty ominous because multiple organizations divided up differently. We're one of them. We have 11 states in our Southwest region. So Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. We're going to go up to Kansas, or Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Montana, South Dakota, Wyoming, and then everything kind of in between, Colorado, Utah. So we have a lot. If one of those 11 sites interests you, we don't have much up north. If you have any idea of archaeology that you're interested in helping to preserve, or people you would like to suggest to work with us, we're happy to take those recommendations. And if we don't have a site, but you're interested in research, I can also help you guys figure that out. So if there's sites local to you, we'll get you a site steward, or we'll just get you a part of the membership.
That would be fantastic too.
Yeah.
And I should say too that yes, research would be encouraged on this site because I think there's some great non-invasive research that could be done here to learn more about what's under the ground, like GPR.
Absolutely.
Even LiDAR probably would be helpful. So we will be encouraging that.
So I'm excited that we have quite a bit of action on the Facebook side tonight. We've got a couple of comments of thank yous. Also, I'm noticing folks are interested in being site stewards other places. Just in case you're not aware, we are a nationwide organization. We have 5 different regions. And so April is the director for the Southwest region, but she has 4 other colleagues that are directors for our other regions. If you're wanting to know more about a region that's outside of the Southwest area, go visit our website. We have all of that contact information there. You can also reach out to April or Mandy or me or Sarah, and we'll get you contacted with the right person. But we have site stewards across the nation doing work for the Conservancy and work hopefully to preserve these critically endangered sites. Helen has a question for you guys. I would like to send you info about a 19th century sugar perjury near Houston, Texas that may still be available. Also, she's got some information about a property.
Please send those acquisitions to both Mandy and me.
Yeah,
we will definitely contact the appropriate people and find out more. And we're going to actually be in that area in the very near future in the next month. So it may work out.
The end of February. Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helen. I didn't finish reading all of her information. If you guys would pop up in your Q&A, you could see the rest of her comment that was in there.
Excellent.
Yeah, that sounds super
Thank
awesome.
you, Helen.
I'm actually excited.
Fantastic. I'm not seeing any more questions in there, but usually right about when I say that, somebody else will pop in with something else. Anybody else want to know anything about Riley, about our property, about the acquisition process? All the
Anybody else?
different things that we do. No, I think my favorite part of this project was getting to travel into a lesser traveled area of New Mexico, going across that bumpy road for 28 miles. Gave us that feeling that we were getting to see something pretty special. So I encourage all of you to go outside and get to know your state if you're in New Mexico or wherever you are. It really was a magnificent experience to get out there. Mandy, April, Sarah, is there anything else you would like to add tonight since we don't have any more questions coming in?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone watching for attending and thank you guys for a great project.
Thank you for just being my teammates, man. This is a great job.
It's a pretty great job, and it's a wonderful organization. If you are not a member, we would love for you to join us. Take a look at our website, visit us
Got a
on
question.
all sorts of different social medias. Mandy, what did you say?
I think we have a question.
Okay.
Oh, I see it.
Another archaeology Fetterman related question. Is there any evidence of other related sites nearby yet? Yes, but they are located on private property and probably some of it is also BLM.
Yeah.
So it's mixed ownership in that area because it is so remote. But again, because it is so remote, I don't necessarily know if it's at risk of being looted. You'd have to really be intent on going out there and out of your way.
Well, and I think that was one of Jerry Fetterman's main objectives out there, was the reason he bought the property and was so, and he was involved in the survey was because he was worried that this area would be completely demolished and all the archaeology would completely be gone or be put under homes. But he was instrumental in really letting people know what was there, even though you can't see it. There are lots and lots of sites out there, including cave sites and all kinds of stuff that are very, very interesting. So there's tons of archaeology out there, but it's not on our land. It's probably, like Mandy said, on BLM or other private property, but it's there.
Aren't Pueblo ruins protected by US laws even on private property? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the answer is yes. And that's why we work harder to protect the ones that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we can control.
That's right.
Right.
So yes.
All right. It's been a true joy working with the three of you on this project. I'm really excited that it is up and available. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Again, we are going to have our next virtual lecture on February 15th. So be watching our social media streams and our website for information about that. And I think that wraps it up for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.